It's time for our feature interview. Tonight, we're talking to the man behind one of Australia's most loved characters, Agro. Now, it's a character that started off as a puppet on a kids' TV show and went on to become an Australian icon with very adult humour. But the man behind the character, Jamie Dunn, well, he is more than just his alter ego. He's dominated Brisbane's radio airwaves with his breakfast show on B105, retaining the ratings crown for around 15 years. He's also released music and starred in film. He is, quite simply, a legend. And I am thrilled to welcome him to McKnight tonight. Jamie, it is so good to have you here.
Rob, how you going after that intro? I sound like a bit of a wanker.
Well, I didn't say you weren't.
That's the only thing you didn't say, though.
Jamie, what do you...
But I want to interview you. How have you been?
I've been very well, thank you, sir. Of course you're going to take over. I don't know why I prepared all these notes.
No, I'll be quiet. You go for it.
You do whatever you want. What do you prefer being famous for? Your own achievements under your own name or the character you created in Agro?
Well, let me think about the answer to that. Probably Agro was an accident and my career was a bit of an accident. And I just have stumbled into whatever success I've had, I've stumbled into kind of, and there's not one particular thing. I mean, Agro, I just should turn up and do him. I just lay down and old Agro had a great attitude. And I was surrounded by some very clever people, Gibbo and Crikey from Cartoon Connection days, and the girls I worked with, Anne-Marie, was a really, really good host, Jill, all of those. And it's interesting that I think I was telling you I was in the Lamb ad, Sam Kekovich.
Yeah.
That's out this week, and Agro gets just about 2 seconds in the end of that. And it's really strange to see a puppet that you did up next to Steve Irwin and Bob Hawke. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's very strange because they've portrayed Agro as like the whole ad is about Australia and Australianism and, that we have hardware stores that sell more sausages than hardware and, really Australian ad. And right in the end, there's a little 2-second flash of Agro. I didn't have to record it. They just used some vision of Agro and some vision of Steve Irwin, who, now that's a real Australian icon. And, I sit here going, my God, how did that happen?
Because you created something. From memory, didn't you take over Agro from someone else?
Yeah, and he's happy about that.
Yeah, but he didn't make it work. You did.
No, I see what you're saying. Yes, I stole him.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I've seen cases like that. Elmo was another example where...
it's sort of like Pluck a Duck. Pluck a Duck was the floor manager of Hey Hey.
Yep.
And he was a very funny man. And the floor manager up at Channel 7 in Brisbane was a guy called Gary, and he did the very first Agro. And then they had some issues, and I had written a song because I used to be a songwriter. I tried to be a pop star, but have a look at me. Seriously. Anyway, I remember doing Brisbane Girls Grammar, and Jamie is a young name, and it was in the era of Sean Cassidy and Leif Garrett, and I had this song out, and we did Brisbane Girls Grammar, and they were all there at lunchtime going, Jamie, 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 and the curtain went up, and I went out, and they went, Jamie, ooh, Jamie.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because you do have a distinct sense of humour, which does come out in your song, Jamie Come Home. Let me take everyone all the way back to 1975 and let's take a listen.
I've played them all. Every school social out and every little church hall. I've played them all. home. Why don't you leave well alone? You know you're not gonna make it. You've been a traveling man with your rock and roll band. She sat at home and she waited. Jamie, come home.
I love that. It's such a
Well,
catchy song, though.
that is a perfect example of when you asked me before, is there anything I'm proud of? I couldn't sing. When you listen to that, I had a cold when I recorded. It was more speaking than singing, you know. I
Mm.
played them all, I played them all. And so it was more spoke. And I recorded that. I paid for that recording. And the last, I flew to Melbourne and went around all the record companies and said the only company that would look at me was Astor Records. And we did a deal. And believe it or not, they said to me, you know, that's a great song. Have you got any more of those? And I remember saying to them, I've got a wardrobe full of songs like that. And I only had the one song. So I came back to the caravan park at Noosa and wrote the other 11 songs for the album. But that song it went 40, 30, 20, 15, 10, and ended up number one in Brisbane. So that you can imagine, is that success? Who knows? But I had a number one requested record. I couldn't even sing. It accidentally happened. And then from that, I was writing songs, and it really, when you write a song, who do you sell it to here in Australia? John Farnham?
Yeah.
That's about it.
There's not many people to sell it to.
So I wrote a song for Agro, for the original Agro. And that was that Gary guy's Agro and Fiona McDonald. And I copied his voice in the middle for the monologue, which was like, oh, Fiona, little furry guys like me, you know, and I copied his voice and put it in the middle. Then he had an issue with Seven, and Seven had an issue with him. They parted ways. Seven had heard me do the voice and rang me and said on the Friday night, can you be at 7 tomorrow morning to do the character Agro? And Rob, I know you've heard me say this, but in entertainment, you say yes to everything,
yes,
and work out how to do it afterwards.
Absolutely.
So whatever offer you get, if you get a ram ad or a lamb ad, who cares? you say, yes, I'm in. And,
well,
you know, and so they rang me at home at Rockley, and the phone number at Rockley back in those days was 474813. There you go. That was my home number. And can I do it tomorrow morning? I went up to Channel 7, lay down, started with the puppet, and I was doing it. I was going, oh, Fiona, we got a trampoline to give away. We got the Smurfs. We got the Snorks. And Ian Duncan, the production manager who turned up to make sure the transfer from one Agro to the next went smoothly, because it was only on a Saturday morning. He crawled across the floor and he'd written out on Nico pen a note. I was halfway through talking to Fiona, and I read the note with the other hand, you know, and it said, can you please make the puppet's mouth move when he speaks? I'd forgotten that bit.
A pretty important part, but I want to go back for a sec, because you mentioned the girls all wanting to see a young boy band type character. I've actually got a photo of one of your album covers from the time. Now tell me that's a sexy beast.
Oh my Lord, look at that. That reminds me of Rasputin more than a rock star. And as a matter of fact, I put that up on Facebook. My mate Pete out of Sydney, he bought one on eBay last week, and I think he paid about $70 for that album.
Wow!
And I put it up, and of course, man, I got an avalanche of people like yourself that couldn't withhold a comment, and most of it mentioned Demis Roussos. And if you don't know who he is, just Google him and see whether it looks exactly the same.
I think our viewers know who he is. You also, now, this is what I meant. You have done so much, Jamie. You did a short film called True Love, and I cannot find for the life of me the actual film. But I did find this behind-the-scenes clip, which is well worth a look. Let's take a look at the behind-the-scenes clip.
Creatively, it was great. I loved it. I heard the director and the producer have a bit of a whisper when I was doing my lines. I heard a bit of a, let's go. Oh, well, we might do that again. Yeah, no, I think that's good, Jamie. It's going good, yeah. But I knew what they were talking about. Huh? Here they come. These are the bag of my ass yesterday for my acting. But they pretend that they like me. Me too. How's it going, guys?
Good, mate. Oh, good. How you going, Trev?
Yeah, good.
Are you just whispering stuff into the camera before we arrive?
No, mate, no.
You seem to really love that experience, judging by the clips I've seen.
That's interesting because that's a short film, and I was the bad guy, of course. I was sacked from 4BC the day before, and
Sorry,
when you're
sacked?
Sacked, yeah. They called me in, shot me under the desk, and when you're sacked from a radio station, well, particularly 4BC, they got the security guard to walk me to the car park. You couldn't go back to your desk. So, and the next morning, I had to be a bad guy in that little short film. And believe you me, I wanted to be a bad guy. I was really in a mood to do something like that. And that, that short film, I got an award. What was the award? I got it.
It was in New York, wasn't it?
Yeah, a piece of glass comes, and I got Best Runner-Up Actor in a short film in the New York Short Film Festival. But it was on a piece of glass, and you could scratch off the runner-up. So I have the piece of glass, but it says Best Actor.
That's such you. That is so you. Look, getting sacked in the industry, we've all been there. You mentioned you got sacked by 4BC, but you did have a lot of success in radio. As I said, it was something like 115 consecutive survey wins. But what was it like? 4BC was one thing. That was a small part of your career. But when B105 management decided to sack you...
I could be John Laws.
Well, I think you could have been, but B105, you'd been there for 15 years. You had such success. You were still number one. Correct me if I'm wrong. So when they sacked you, it must have been a kick in the teeth.
A little bit, because I think I was there all up 20-something years. But, I was number one when they sacked me. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because my last day was at the Children's Hospital. We started to raise money for the Children's Hospital and stuff.
Yeah, I've seen the vision.
And oh, man, that was my last show. And I'm looking at kids in windows that have put up thank you and all that.
Yeah, they're literally holding them against the window like that, saying thank you.
And it nearly killed me. It nearly killed me. But that was another one, like I started in radio, and most radio guys have got a radio voice,
Yeah.
Rob, you know how they go, it's 33 degrees and chance of a late storm. Speaking of storm, here's Rain by Dragon.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, please. But I just talked like I talk now. And, I don't know, maybe the audience forgave me because I was Agro, or they got the humour because I was Agro to start off with and had been in their lounge rooms, It was interesting because when we did the contract for B105, they said, we'll give you $2,000 a point above 7 points, and because they were on 7%, and that's an incentive. And I said, I don't know anything about incentives. They said, you'll definitely go up 2 points in the first survey. I said, well, then why don't you pay me an extra $4,000 now and lift the rate? And they said, no, incentives. I went, all right. Well, I'm telling you, not 4%. B105 went from 7% to 29% in the first survey. Unbelievable. I made like 40 something grand in incentives. And I'm going, oh, I like incentives. And
Yeah.
I tried to say, no, I don't want them.
Did they keep that incentive up throughout the run?
Right the way through. Unbelievable.
Brilliant.
And
Absolutely
it just,
brilliant.
at one stage, and this is the accidental part, because in radio, once they get your personality, they're like Lawsy or whoever it is, once they understand who you are and you become part of the day to day, the ratings are there. And man, oh man, at one stage we had something like 28% of the market in Brisbane.
Jesus.
I know, and then of course they bought, or we were bought out by Triple M, so it was Triple M B105, and then I'd be driving to work and I'd hear "I Will Always Love You" by Whitney Houston, and I'm thinking, my God, I can hear the men leaving now. They were trying to shift the male audience over to Triple M to build them. It was kind of brutal, really, but it didn't.
Yes,
make
and
much
now
difference.
Southern Cross Austereo, who was the owner of B105 and Today FM, and all their fiddling, Rome has burned, and Brisbane's doing okay, but Sydney's a basket case.
Oh, I love that bit. The one I love about that is where Kyle, and I got a great story about Kyle, but anyway, Kyle Sandilands, he was going to leave, and I won't say the name of the program director, but I saw him on the news going, that they went to something like 4% or some terrible, terrible percentage when Kyle left, and the guys are going, "This is where we expect it to be." Really?
Yeah, you wanted to give up a 16% share for a 4% share?
Well, Kyle, believe it or not, he thinks I'm a god.
He does.
To this very day, he thinks I'm a god. And I love that, because when I was someone and, Breakfast Radio and B105 in Brisbane, he was a street kid.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to me, I was leaving B105 one morning after the shift, and this homeless kid taps on my car window, and I put the window down, and he said, I've got some ideas for Agro if you want to hear them, Jamie. And I said, well, I got an office just around the corner. If you walk around there, I'll meet you there. We'll have a coffee. And that ended up being Kyle Sandilands. And I gave him the time of day, and he's never forgotten it. His idea was that he could do Agro on the weekends because he could do the voice. And I could have the weekend off. And I went, good idea, but no.
That's naivety, not knowing that. No, I'm going to keep performing it. I'm not giving it out to someone else, but he can do the voice.
I didn't want to be Gary.
No, exactly. But it's funny you mention him, because when you left B105, there was a headline at the time suggesting Kyle and Jackie O were going to be brought up to Brisbane and networked into Sydney. I've actually got the headline here. Have a look at this from 2005. Dunn leaves B105, fueling Kyle and Jackie O rumours. Jamie Dunn has announced he will end his 16 years on air with B105 this December to take up the position as breakfast anchor at the Heating Noosa, fueling rumours that Kyle and Jackie O will take his place.
Bloody hell, I've never ever seen that. And, that makes it sound like I resigned, but I
No, that was what was said at the time when everything's nice. But you've talked openly about that.
Yeah,
Kyle and Jackie.
They took me next door to a cafe, and they said, "Today's your last day. We've got a press conference when we get back. You're finished." And like that's radio. Well, that's like, of all people,
Yeah. Ita
all of a
Buttrose
sudden-
says you're not anyone until you've been sacked in the media.
That's right. When you're in entertainment, all of a sudden the fridge can fall on you. All of a sudden,
Yeah.
you can be number one with 27% of the market, and bang, you're done. And I was lucky enough to pick up Zinc FM up the coast. But anyway, I was around having this coffee, and they've gone, you're finished. We're going back to the station. There's a press conference. Everyone's flown up from Sydney. And I said, well, that's not happening. And and I remember Richard Barker going, no, it's all arranged. I said, if you want me to stagger around that car park crying like you've killed one of my children, you'll go ahead with it. If not, you wait until I can find somewhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
And the other guy that had the meeting with me turned to Richard Barker and said, he'll do it,
It's so true. But that's the point, isn't it? Executives saying, get them off air now, whereas by doing it the way, because at the time, it really was playing out that it was your decision, you were, pulling back and everyone was doing the right thing. We know the truth now, but at the time, people believed you were retiring and you got to go out with dignity. The way they were planning that wouldn't have been dignified.
No. Well, look at Robin Bailey now.
Yeah.
There's a perfect example. Her breakfast show, all of a sudden, the fridge fell on her. And I spoke to her over Christmas, and she said, I don't think I'll get another radio gig. I'm just having some time off to get my thoughts together. And I said, you can come back with something. Trust me. I've seen the movie. Just settle down. It'll all come good. And then, of course, they've gone, oh, no, we made a mistake. You're back on. How would you feel? Like, she's got to start. I don't know when she starts. It'll be around here sometime. But
I think it's around January 20. I think it's in a week or so that her show is coming back from the dead. I mean, that just gives you an idea of the state of radio. But that slot is earmarked on Kiss FM for Kyle and Jackie O. Despite what's happened in Melbourne, where it hasn't worked, would their show work as a network show in Brisbane?
I think it would, I think it would.
Agree.
The problem that Robin's got, imagine your self-belief after you've been sacked, and then all of a sudden, supposedly, the audience has demanded your return. Has it? But you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So they come back. Well, they'll need to rate. If they don't, look, the pressure on them now is massive.
Yeah, well, they've been getting an 11.2% share from memory, which years ago was a winning share. But in the market,
27 was a winning year for me.
No one's anywhere where you used to be, my friend.
I got 27% and got sacked.
Yeah, exactly. But 11.2 gets you about fourth, I think she is, or maybe fifth. But years ago, after you, 11.2, she actually was winning with an 11.2% share. So it's a very different market now. There's so much turmoil in Brisbane. Do you think radio executives actually know what they're doing?
In that instance, no. Something else must have happened, I think, for that to transpire. But no, I don't think they do. It's in radio, when the flavour, if you're the flavour, goes off within the building, you kind of get a feel for it, And I remember taking a leak with a bloke at Today FM, and I was on a 3-year deal there, and there we were in the men's painting the wall as you do, you know what I mean?
What a lovely picture you're painting.
and this guy who I trusted, he was in an executive position. He'd just come down from the exec meeting. He just turned to me and said, "Watch your back." And I knew I was gone. So, but that happened to me.
Well, this is when you went down to Sydney to work on Today FM with Wendy Harmer and Paul Holmes. What was that like?
working with Wendy Harmer was like having cactus run down your eye.
She didn't like male co-hosts that took away the spotlight, did she?
Oh, she had her own issues, I think, and I was a bit
Because Jamie, let me give you context. I was a listener. So I was a listener and I heard her with Peter Moon, and it always seemed like she was angry if you guys, when it was him and when it was your turn, were making jokes and being funny. That is not an insider's view. That is a listener's view.
Well, I remember I used to do a character called Hector Pascals, and he was a gay weatherman.
Yep.
And he was actually on the cover of Gay Pride magazine, and so he was embraced by the gay community too. Yeah, and she didn't really like that character because it was a bit silly for her. And I was just scratching it down, and she looked across and she said, "Are you going to say that?" And I said, yeah. And she said, "Well, that's not funny." And like that was the atmosphere. You try working.
That's so hard when someone does that to you. How do you? Yeah.
Well,
that's hard to beat.
I was delivering that character, and she was facing the wall, shaking her head. So it was very difficult. But
well, that's sabotage.
Yeah, to each his own.
Will radio survive?
Don't think so. I was talking about Rob. I was talking about this just the other day because we're talking about AM. I do 11 stations out west, up here in Queensland, on the Resonate network, and they're all AM. And I was talking about it, and someone said to me, they don't even make AM available in car. You buy a new car, you can't get AM. It has to go eventually.
Yeah.
So there you go. I don't think so. And I know people that listen to Kyle and Jackie O religiously, but they listen to them podcasts,
via the
other platforms. They're not necessarily turning on in the morning and listening to the whole show. They get the best of the show and then double check it in the afternoon or nighttime or whatever, and they're right up to it. Yeah.
The world has certainly changed. Well, look, before I let you go, I do believe you've got a furry friend with you.
Which one do you want? There's an option of 2 there, Rob.
Maybe Agro. I'm a bit fearful about what you mean.
Well, there's Agro 1 and Agro 2. So Agro 1's the one you want.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
Let me see. Hang on. Where are we? There. Oh, this will have to be quick. I can't work him out.
You've got the reverse. Agro, hello.
I'm in the Ram ad.
Well, while I've got you both there, so, Jamie, you recently posted that you're in talks with Channel 7 for a 1-hour up late special with Agro. I've got the headline here. It's been turned into a headline. Look at this. Mr. Brisbane picked up on it. They're saying that there's this up late special. Was that real?
Yeah. Well, we're having a chat about it. Just only one 1-hour show. And didn't you come to the Agro up late in Maryborough? Was that you?
No.
Why didn't you come to that one?
You didn't invite me. If I knew, I'd be there.
Well, my mate Pete and I are writing it, and we've the opening that we've got to start off with is Agro sort of being quite sexual and so forth, and
shock horror.
And then he turns around and Fat Cat's in the corner, and he goes, "Oh, I wouldn't be laughing if I was you. You're next." So
what would the show be?
Sorry?
What would the show be, this 1-hour one-off special?
Well, for an hour of television, it's like 47 minutes, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it would be some of the goofs, like the outtakes that have had, oh, my God, 6 million hits.
Yes, the one where you're swearing incessantly and doing a lot of sex acts.
No, my favourite one is where Anne Marie, she's got this pencil with a pink sort of doll on the end.
Oh,
his
yes,
hair's all over.
the troll.
And yeah, that's right, the troll. And Agro goes, I reckon my hair would go like that too. I've had a pencil up my ass.
Oh, Jamie. Does Seven still own the copyright to Agro?
Yes, they own him lock, stock, and barrel, and they've been really, really generous. With like I'm saying, the Ram ad or the Lamb ad. They called me with that, and they've been really good. Yeah.
And when I had you on Studio 10 a couple of times, you had to get their permission to use Agro, which they did. They were very generous and allowed you to bring Agro on.
Better now. There was a lady there that used to merchandise Bob the Builder in England, and talk about snakes and ladders in entertainment. She came out and started working for Seven in merchandising, and I flew to Sydney to have a chat to her, and I sat in her office, and she said, "Now, tell me about this Agro character." And you think, oh God, here we go again. But no, it's been really good, yeah. So
he looks a bit tired there. Is he all right?
No, it's me. I can't get him on.
Over to your left a bit. You're going the right. There we go.
Oh, that's what I need. I need good direction.
Hello, Agro.
Hello, Rob. How you going? How's it hanging?
Well, it's hanging better than yours, I think.
I don't have one.
Exactly. I'm going to play one last clip for you. You talked about the late night television. This is how big people need to understand how big Agro is and was. He even hosted late night television, filling in for Steve Vizard, not just as a guest, actually hosting the show. Let's have a look at this clip from the 90s.
Yeah, welcome back. Oh, boy, am I settling in this chair. What chair? There's no chair. Paul?
Yes, Agro.
I suppose you're pleased to see me back on the show, hey?
Oh, look, I'm beside myself. Absolutely. And I notice that you are too.
No, but I know I'm up myself.
When all else fails, Jamie, I know I'm up myself. A joke there.
Well, how relaxed was I? Isn't that strange? How relaxed was Agro? It's just, it was funny because I'll tell you how I ended up hosting on Friday nights instead of Steve.
Yeah.
I was at the Ekka in Brisbane, backstage, and everyone else went to the Cattleman's Bar, and I stayed there bagging people I worked with to this guy. And within months, he ended up being the biggest thing in Australian television, which was Steve Vizard. And then he called me and said, "You want to do Friday nights? I'm going to take them off." And that's how that happened. And they flew me to Melbourne. I sat in the meeting and in Marble Row, and they went, "We'll do the top 7 there." I went, "Yeah, got it." And on the way out, I said to the production assistant, "What's the top 7?"
Oh, had you not even seen the show?
Well, because I was doing breakfast radio.
Oh, of course.
I couldn't stay up that late. I'd never seen the show. And I just turned up and did it. I was that confident, eh? What a wanker.
No, well, you brought us full circle. You might be that, but you're so many other things as well. Jamie, I love you, in case that wasn't clear. I think you're an absolute legend. I really appreciate you being on McKnight tonight with us.
I appreciate you asking me, except the only problem is when you do these things, I look at myself and go, look how old I am. Look at it. God.
You're still young at heart, my friend.
Well, this Christmas party in the new year, come to my Christmas party. I'll show you Agro too.
Okay, it's a deal. Thank you, Jamie.
He can't wait to meet you.
McKnight tonight.